It's behind me, isn't it? Snow monsters? It's no problem.
Welcome to Kicking It with Sensei, and today we're joined by Hema expert and snowman assassin, Lauren Danger Shaw. You're very welcome, Lauren.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
No problem. And if you could just give the audience a little bit of background into your martial arts.
Oh, absolutely. So when I was 18, I studied karate for a little while. I thought, oh, ladies should learn some, some moves, some self-defense that might. And I drifted away from it, went to uni, got, degree, then you work and finally get a career that you like. And it's like, I miss doing martial arts, but I don't want to do karate. I want to do something different. And I stumbled into jiu-jitsu. There was a little class ran at the local community center, and that turned into a year. And then for almost another year, I did jiu-jitsu at an actual dojo with a sensei, and it was great. But I got to the point where I wanted to learn more. And my sister said, well, if you don't want to do jiu-jitsu anymore, you still need to do something. You have a passion for martial arts. I found this thing online. This is sword fighting. Why don't you try it? Why don't you find out what it's about? I looked into it. I went to the first introductory class, and it turns out there are all these manuals, and they tell you how to actually sword fight. And suddenly I was like, there's an actual martial art for sword fighting. And 10 years later, now I'm helping teach it and have intro students and courses. Not right now, of course, but yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Excellent. And what do you think made you fall in love with the European martial arts?
Well, I had done some history in university, and just looking at the manuals, when you see that, oh, there's all this description, there's a tangible text, and it was just seems so different. Something that I could pick up and I could read myself, and it wasn't always going to be someone's interpretation. And then, if you want to train with someone different, they would go, oh, no, but I could have an interpretation. I could say, oh, well, I'm seeing this in a manual, and swords are just cool. I mean, come on.
Swords are cool. Swords are cool.
They are.
And would you have a favorite sword, sort of from popular culture kind of thing? Would
favorite sword from? I like Anduril from Lord of the Rings.
Excellent. Excellent.
That is, I have a cheap version from back before I started Hema, and I hide that because I have much nicer swords than that. But
excellent. I've always been a big fan of the Sword of Omens from Thundercats. I think I kind of fell in love with that as a kid and kind of always wanted that sword, but never actually got a decent version. I was always kind of training foam or wooden swords. And
there's some plastic ones probably with a push button to make sounds, but it's not a real steel sword.
My mum bought me one time. Now it was plastic, but you pressed the button and it extended by about 3 inches. So
oh wow!
But again, it was plastic. It wasn't. It wasn't the same now. And have you any swords to show today? Have you? Or
I have lots of swords to show. What would you like to start with?
I have long swords, maybe. Or
oh right, longsword. Longsword is what I recommend everyone starts with if they're getting into this.
Excuse me.
Either longsword or saber. Those are the gateway drugs of Hema. But this is my training longsword.
Excellent.
Very 15th century, tapers down to a point, so I could use it for an armored fighting demo as well as or harnessfechten, which is what the German for that, or Lausfechten, or unarmored fighting.
Excellent.
This is made by SGT Blades in Airdrie, Alberta. It's actually close by to me, and it's a really good sword. It's got nice flex in the tip, so if you have to stab someone, I did the grip myself.
Excellent.
So
very nice. And have you a favorite sort of era for sword fighting, or?
I have two eras that I like for sword fighting. I like early 14th century sword and buckler.
Yeah.
And
what type of sword was it?
That would be an arming sword.
Excellent.
And it's from Kickin in Russia.
Excellent.
Folded over tip for safety, but a good example of a nice late medieval arming sword.
Excellent.
And I also, one I don't teach because I'm still learning about it. I also like Messer. There's the Messer, and the Messer is really cool because it has the nagel on it.
Excellent. Would that be a more modern kind of addition to swords from Europe, would it?
I have training sabers, 19th century training sabers. I didn't bring them upstairs, but yeah, we've done as our club, we've done a lot of 19th century saber training as well, and it's a lot of fun. And when you have, it's light, it's fast, it's nimble, and you can really do some fantastic moves. So that's another thing that I've gone into is 19th century saber, which is very different from 14th century arming sword.
Excellent. That's all the sword work I've done has been Japanese sword work, so it's kind of, this is all very new to me as well. But and sort of, would you do reenactments with the swords, would you, or of historical battles or any of that kind of thing?
Well, we haven't done historical battle because when you do reenactment, it gets very expensive. There's a lot of money that you put into all of the costuming, and members of our group, we spend all our money on the swords, so we have nothing left for the costuming. Because when you want to study and you want to change every 3 or 4 months, you know, now I need a quarterstaff. Now I need, I broke it, I need a new one. Oh, I need a saber. Oh, now I need an arming sword. Now I need a long sword. Now I need a messer. And suddenly, you know, I've got, I don't know how many swords in the house. Well over 20. You can see, you know, training versions of swords. And then you buy a nicer one, a better one. And so it's, you know, but we've done demonstrations and people like seeing the actual techniques, and we kind of stage how a fight would work between two people, do little duels and skirmishes.
Would there be a lot of difference between the European method of sword fighting and the Japanese?
There is some difference. There's a lot of commonalities. If you do one, you can pick up the other quite well. Like, for example, cutting with a sword. Cutting with the sword is going to be the same. You've got to work on your edge alignment. You're going to do a push and a pull. So if you have a katana or if you have a long sword, you still have that motion. It's the same. However, with the katana, you don't have, the tsuba is very small compared to the guard on the long sword. So your techniques might be different. So your cutting pattern, but as far as your defense and how you counter, it's going to be different. So that's where they diverge, because based on the type of sword, you know, how do you protect your hands, or what's your reach? And if we were just talking about a katana, no dachi or anything larger, then we're looking at, you know, it's closer in, where it's a long sword, you can have a bit of distance, for example.
Excellent. And would there be a lot of females involved in Hema?
There's a huge amount. I should have warned. On Facebook, we have a group, the Sphinxes or Sphinges, and so all over the world, there are a lot of women who are getting into it. And swords are a great equalizer because it's not about strength at this point. It's about kind of technique, coordination, bit of speed. So women really do get into it. We have a few at our club. For a while, I was the only one, but being senior and, you know, being an instructor, that helps bring other women into the club. And, you know, they start with this kind of, they like She-Ra. They like, you know, in video games where you can have, you know, make whatever character you want. And they find that, there's representation. And then they find out that they can actually learn this stuff. And you kind of hook them in. And now we have 5 or 6 in just our group, between our new class and our advanced class. And there are clubs which are 50% and sometimes 70% women out there across North America. I know some really great female instructors that I've taken courses with, and they teach some great things. And again, because it's not just going to be about strength, because you're going to have the skill and the coordination and the speed that comes into it, it really equalizes.
It does now. I've actually mentioned this a few times with female martial artists recently in interviews, but I always thought that females are sort of more technical minded when it comes to martial arts and combat. So the speed, accuracy is always a lot sharper than their male counterparts for the most part now. And when you take strength out of the equation, it's a whole different battlefield. But But do you think Hema has grown over the last 5 to 10 years?
I think it's really doubled in size. And we can see that based on the number of people making Hema equipment. So all the protective stuff, new types of gloves, new companies coming out in the last 5 years for swords. I mean, Kvetin that makes my arming sword, they're relatively new, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They weren't a thing, but now they're people who sing their praises all over the place. Whereas there are companies that have been making swords that are now shifting into that. And even Leon Paul, the big sport fencing manufacturer, does Hema stuff now. So we've really seen growth. There's a lot more work to do and a lot more room to grow, but it's really, this is one of these good points. If you really want to get into something before it gets too big, this is the time.
That's it, yeah. And do you think sort of popular media, like such as Netflix and that, are playing a big part in promoting Hema through games, Game of Thrones and shows such as that? Or
yes and no. It's a two-part answer because people are getting interested in sword fighting, and so in Game of Thrones you have Brienne of Tarth. So, a lot of women are going to want to be like Brienne of Tarth, but then you have to remember movie fighting and real fighting are two different things.
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of break down that, well, you're not going to be able to do this big spinning twirl because you're going to get stabbed in the back of your neck if you turn your back to someone.
Yeah.
So they have to then understand, but most of the time you can get them hooked in and they do want to stay for a little while and learn it. You do get, they think, oh, this is cool. And am I going to be able to do these big fancy things? And, they might come from cosplaying. They might come from, a video game culture. They might come from role-playing game culture. And they want to be able to do something as part of their costume or going to a convention. And we're teaching you, well, it's real fighting. And, you do have to, we do want people to learn the technique and not just fool around. So you do lose a few people, both men and women, who come into it thinking, I want to do these big Conan the Barbarian moves. And when you tell them, well, no, those are really bad, and here's why. And then they kind of trail off after, a few classes. But you get those ones who understand the technical side of it, especially, and they just soak into it like sponges. It's great.
Yeah, I think martial arts has always had that kind of aspect. Now you've got people coming on to karate classes thinking 2 or 3 classes and they're going to be swinging nunchucks like Bruce Lee, and it's just not going to happen. But how did you take a step onto YouTube? What made you make that decision? And
I think like a lot of people, I mean, it is pandemics, it's lockdown times. In Canada, and in the UK, we've got a lot of lockdown to deal with. And I got to the point where I missed teaching. Back in November, we just weren't allowed to do any classes anymore. No sporting, no martial arts, nothing, even with masks on. We were doing it with masks on the whole time. If you need to take your mask off, then you go over to a corner, or if you live in the same house, we do have a mother and a son who come to one of our introductory classes. They're now moving into more intermediate stuff. Okay, you can take your masks off because you're in the same house, but otherwise, when I come over, we do all the things, but they said nothing, and it's been shut down, and we have no restart date for any kind of sports. So no martial arts at all allowed. And I thought, well, I have all this knowledge. I'm still doing research. I'm still reading. I can't, even if we could go back, I still can't run a sword and buckler, but I need to do something that's an outlet.
Yeah.
You have knowledge, you want to share it. So I decided, well, let's start putting the videos on YouTube and we'll see if anyone wants to watch them. And people do. People want to watch. So that's
your channel's brilliant now. It's especially videos where you're cutting snowmen up with swords and things. It really, it adds a comedy kind of aspect, which is kind of
that's me being me. I'm a zany comedic type of person, and you have to put that into your video. You can't. It's not going to be this stern and strict, because no one wants to just watch me hit things. They want to understand and they want to feel welcome.
Excuse me. Yeah, definitely. But he may be quite big in North America.
It's not so big in Canada. It's a bit bigger in the United States. The clubs, there's some little established clubs. We don't have a lot of tournaments in Canada. They tend to be smaller tournaments and conventions for it. And it's not like it is in Europe. But I think if you live in Europe, particularly if you're in the UK, if you're in Germany, if you're in Italy, you've got those connections, you've got the manuals,
Yeah.
you've got that, oh, this was written here, or this is, you know, we can trace back. We've got the iconography, we've got the relics of that time in our museums, and you feel that connection. People really go into it. Whereas there's a bit of disconnect here, where it's more Hollywood is the North American ideal.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's definitely not as big as it should be. It's not as big as it's going to be.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. We're getting there.
It's slow. But even here in Ireland now, it's like I was kind of looking into historical arts, Irish arts, and all I could find was the stick fighting. There doesn't seem to be a big influence of sword play, or anything like that now. But I haven't actually looked too much around the rest of Europe. But have you ever tried any of the empty hand Hema? Any of the?
Yes, I've done the ringen. So we've looked at the German styles. We've done some wrestling, and I've done by going over to the UK and going to a few things there. I've done some sabat. I've done a little bit of bartitsu. I've done all the way up to World War II empty-handed combatives. Yeah. So there's a whole line. It's like we think of Hema as ending in the 19th century, but there's some 20th century stuff too if we look at World War II. But the best part, I think wrestling is good, both some catch wrestling and a lot of ringen, a lot of unarmed from German, and a little bit into the comfring and the kind of the real battlefield style of grappling, but you can't do too much with that because you will get hurt.
Yes.
You've got to know exactly where to stop, you know, because that throwing someone on, you know, it's like I throw my sword down. That's step one of the play. Then I'm supposed to wrestle and grapple, and then I'm supposed to lift the person over and throw them onto the sword.
Yeah.
So that they land on the guard and it knocks the wind out of them. You can't quite do all of those things. You've got to take a pause at certain points, and you've got to know where to stop. But it's intense. Yeah. It is, and it's also, you know, it's really mean. But then coming from a jiu-jitsu background, I start saying, oh yeah, well that's exactly like this, or it's exactly like this move, and they are separated by a lot of distance and even time, and you can see that it's just body mechanics. People understand body mechanics, and it works. And so there's a right way to do it, and you can look at Eastern, Western martial arts, and even African, Indian, and you can see that there are all these similarities. And that really thrills me. I like, you know, it's like I might teach Hema, and I study that, but I love always seeing from other martial arts around the world.
Yeah.
Because you can put those, that really comes into it. And so open-handed stuff's a lot of fun to do, because that's where you start noticing all the similarities. It's like, okay, well, this makes sense because it, you know, this is how the body works, and it's neat that people at different times and different places come up with the same solution.
Excellent. I love the aspect of looking at weaponry from around the different parts of the world as well. And would you have a favorite weapon outside of Hema that you'd like to practice or like to learn?
I like Chinese Dao is really cool. That's a really nice cutting sword, and you know the drills that they do in various forms of kung fu with them, they're very fluid and they look really good too.
Yeah.
And I like Indian stuff, particularly the punch dagger, the guitar. It's the triangular one with the frame. That is fascinating, and just the varieties that they have in those. Some with like a little pistol attached to them. Some that spring open for catching a weapon. So there are Indian and Chinese weaponry always fascinated me. And I've been to the Royal Armory in Leeds, and it's like, okay, if you do the European section, you got that. I'll just go and spend lots of time in the Indian section. It's just fantastic.
Excellent. And do you think technology is playing a big part in pushing martial arts forward at the minute and the future?
I think it is. It definitely makes it more accessible, and it allows you to move beyond that. You know, I have a sensei who teaches me this is the way to do it, and you do it this way, and if you're wrong, give me 20 push-ups. And I think people need to see that, well, it's great that you have a technique and it works really well, but someone else may have a different interpretation of it, or they come from a different school. And I think a lot of people might get turned off of martial art because they might learn something. They might go to a particular type of karate when, you know, there's a different school of it that might suit them better.
Yeah.
And having YouTube and having websites, being able to see videos of different styles and see what really captures your interest. It's like, I want to learn martial art. Well, what do I do? You know, there's doing a trial class at a dojo or going to a school, or there's watching a dozen videos on YouTube and saying, oh, really, I like the techniques of that, and then going into that one. So it's huge. This is how we get our information.
That's it. And finally, how can people find you online and find out more about yourself and about Hema?
Oh, well, if people want to find out more about Hema, they can search for Hema Alliance, and that's always good. There's a website, Wiktenauer, Wiktenaur, and that'll show them what the manuals look like. And for my stuff on YouTube, it's youtube.com/c/Lauren Danger Shaw, and on Twitter it's Lauren Danger. And those are the best places to find my stuff. And our club website, which we're not doing much right now, is calgarysword.ca.
Excellent. And your YouTube channel is fantastic. Now I look forward to the posts every week, and I'll put links to everything in the description of this video too. And it was an honor having you on, Lauren, and meeting you.
Thank you so much. It was great I was really been excited all morning to come and do the interview, and I think it's gone really well.
Yeah, perfect. And thank you.